Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Single Malt Strategy Podcast. I am Eric, also known as Tortuga Power, and I'm joined again by my co-host, or really the host. I always consider you. I defer to you, Matt. Matt, the historical gamer, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great.
Throat's bothering you a little bit today, huh?
Yeah, hopefully it's not too obvious, but I think I'm coming down with a cold. It's that time of year.
They'll never know, and obviously we'll never mention it, so.
What is that? Oh, no. It can't be. It is. A resident submarine and digital simulation expert. No man has shot down more aircraft or sunk more shipping on this podcast. The only one of us that normal people fear. The one... the only... Wolfpack345.
Wow. That was, oh man, that was beautiful.
Welcome.
Hey.
Hopefully that screaming wasn't any of us on the podcast, but...
Oh no, of course not. Of course not. I will say expert may be a little...
I mean, listen, everybody has their own opinions on things, but of anybody on this podcast, you certainly would qualify as our resident expert in submarine and simulation games.
Oh, well, I'm happy to be on, as always. I'm sure we have lots to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, we're a little bit late for the end of 2021, but, it's February. There's still time to talk about what we're excited about this year. So, in today's episode, we're going to be talking about our most anticipated games for 2022, which I think there's quite a few of. I don't know that we felt the same way about 2021. Tortuga, what did you play a lot of? I mean, what were your thoughts on the year?
Yeah, I think for all three of us, I think that there was probably at least one game that we could consider one of the best, if not, I mean, I'll let you speak for yourselves, but War on the Sea obviously came out, and it was kind of like, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. Yeah, in the in the field, in the desolate field of games in 2021. War on the Sea does stand out, but it's basically...
That's damning with faint praise.
I think it's a good game, but I didn't have much competition, so it was kind of a shoo-in for the top three. So I played a lot of that. I'll let you guys speak a little bit more about that too, since I guess all three of us played it a fair amount. I want to start off by asking, I know that we don't always bring up mods, but I think that the Tokyo Express mod has just changed War on the Sea pretty significantly. So maybe this question's for Wolf. How big of a difference will people who played the original game see if they want to return to it and play with the Tokyo Express mod?
I think they'd see a pretty big difference, but the large issue, like the fundamental issues with War on the Sea, like the AI, unfortunately are still there, and like the grind at the end is still there, but it is more enjoyable, that is for sure. More variety in gameplay and all that good stuff.
Have you played it with the new patch that adds Fog of War? Because I feel like that could be something that would, as these task forces get detected by you, the idea of not knowing what is in that task force feels like it could be significant, especially if you're juggling multiple enemy task forces and trying to figure out where you're going to send your carrier strikes or whatever. I'm just wondering how big of an impact that's made.
Yeah, I saw that patch came out. I haven't played with it admittedly yet. It did pique my interest though, and I'm not sure if I'll play with it this patch. I'm kind of taking a little bit of a break from War on the Sea. I did play a lot of it this year, and for that reason, it probably is the most notable game of 2021 for me.
Did you have anything else? I know you do a lot of like flight sims. Were there any particular modules in IL-2, or I think you got into DCS a bit this year too?
No, sure, yeah. I've been flying, a good amount of flight sims, like I kind of always do. I guess one game I do want to mention that was kind of a sleeper hit for me. I wasn't really anticipating it or anything. Is Ready or Not. It's a first-person shooter. It's like it's like SWAT 4. Like small team, close quarters combat, clearing, houses and stuff like that. And I've had a lot of fun with it, and I think Tortuga has as well. We have played it a fair bit together.
Yeah, very enjoyable. we used to play the Arma 3 co-op missions together. And we're kind of itching for something a little bit more tactical, room clearing and all that. And basically Ready or Not fills that vacancy in my gaming world perfectly.
I remember when you guys used to play Arma and invite me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I've had an invite to Ready or Not yet.
Do you own Ready or Not?
I mean, that can be resolved easily. It just kind of feels personal.
Well, if you owned it, it'd be, I'd invite you. But since you don't own it, it's almost like, typing, hey, do you want to play Ready or Not? That's just a lot of work.
Look, when we're playing Ready or Not, we just ring the dinner bell, pour the food on the ground, and anybody who has it comes and eats.
Yeah, whoever wants to come to the trough.
I don't know where to go with that analogy, but okay. I kind of feel the same way with one caveat as you, Tortuga, about 2021. So obviously I played a lot of War on the Sea as well. Probably my most played game of the year. I played a fair bit of Ultimate Admiral Dreadnought, but that game, I don't know. I mean, that might even warrant like a separate episode to talk about it.
It does.
Because there's still so much missing from that game, and I feel like they pushed the campaign out for that thing just because people have been bugging them about the campaign for 2 years. Like they said it was coming soon for like 2 years. And eventually I think they just pushed something out. But with what they claim it's going to end up being, like to me, it feels like they have to rebuild almost the entire campaign. So why would you pay coding and programmers and stuff like that to build something? It kind of reminds me of like before a big gaming convention, where studios, this used to be more frequent, they would like build a demo just for the convention, and then the final product would have no resemblance to the demo, but they built it just for the demo so they could try and build hype and whatnot. It's not quite to that extent, but it does feel a little bit like that, where it's like, oh, well, we'll get it out there and then we'll figure it out later. So we'll see what happens with that. But other than that, yeah, I mean, I kind of agree. There's not been a ton of games this year. I think
that we've overlooked one that I think was it was a sleeper hit for me, at least. Came out of nowhere. Even if you don't enjoy it, I think that almost anybody can respect the effort and the artistic style and all that. And for me, that game probably might even be my game of the year is High Fleet, released by Microprose, and just a one-man effort. So I try not to judge games too much based on the development team size. Like, more for me is, do I enjoy it or not? It is pretty impressive that this single person has so perfectly married game design, game art, and then got the coding done himself. I mean, I'm sure he's contracted some art. It's a really good game. For those of you who don't know what it is, how to even describe it.
Isn't it like Battleships in the Sky?
Yeah, it is. It's a Navy in the sky. It's
Is it like turn-based? Is it real time? Like, how's the game?
So the main combat in the game is done actually.
It's like 2D combat, like side by side.
Oh, you know what? I got a perfect analogy. It's like airships conquer the skies. The 2D combat is exactly like Airship Conquer the Skies, where you have your one ship that you're controlling on a screen, and you have up to 3 enemy ships that you're fighting against. It's side perspective, so you see the ground on the bottom, the highest point in the sky is at the top, and you're aiming your gun with your mouse cursor and clicking. So that's the tactical combat, which is very good. It's they have all the right sounds. The guns are very meaty.
It sounds really good.
Yeah.
And like just the screen you're looking for, like when it's the art style, the rain droplets on your screen and stuff is all like super cool and atmospheric.
Yeah, they do a really good job with the atmosphere.
Yeah, and the world building in general is really well done.
It's interesting because that's like the game that I heard the most out of. We talked about last year about Microprose and its return, and there's a bunch of games that we're excited about, but most of those haven't come out yet. They've released a few things, but I feel like the one that was supposed to be their big effort was Carrier Deck, and that kind of, I saw a few people playing it when it first came out. It seemed to do some of the co-op stuff reasonably well, but that game kind of seemed to fizzle compared to High Fleet, which everybody I know, and I haven't played a ton of it, but everybody I know who played a bunch of it was like enamored with it, which I think is interesting.
Just jumping back into the strategic portion of High Fleet, you're moving your fleet around, and you have to actually be mindful of all the radar. Do you want to turn on your radar because then people are going to detect that you're emitting radar? Do you turn it off and kind of fly blind? You have thermal sensors, so you can like move escort ships outside of your main fleet It's almost like a little bit of Command Modern Operations in some bizarre distant future with ships flying in the sky. Really interesting game. It's considered, I guess, somewhat of a roguelike of all things because you're kind of meant to fail the game and then have to restart. And basically the main way everyone would think to play, which is just to keep all your ships in one fleet and maybe at rare moments send out a small detachment. Turns out, based on what if some people, myself, this is my experience and several other people I've seen playing this a lot, that's not even the best way of playing. It's actually better to spread your fleets out and do all kinds of strategy. Anyway, it's very interesting that the game has that many different playing styles that are viable. And one other thing I would like to say about the game is it's got this very distinct Russian feel that you're fighting the game sometimes. Not that it's frustrating that the gameplay itself almost is supposed to be this you succeed by just barely overcoming these really monstrous odds, and that gets you back to even. It doesn't mean you win. You're just barely struggling on to the next thing, which I kind of have this like Metro 2033 type vibe to the world, where you're just barely eking by.
Yeah, I love that. It's not forgiving. It's pretty punishing.
I feel like that might have been, so the one person I saw who was publicly kind of critical of the game at launch, I think was Rob Zachney, who works for Waypoint and does 3 Moves Ahead. But then he ended up revisiting it, and he was live tweeting it, and it was, you could just watch through his tweets. It's like, all right, so you like this game now, because he's just talking about all of these intricate details and sort of the story for his fleet, and it's just you're watching the guy go from a couple days ago posting about how skeptical he was about the game and kind of how frustrating parts of it were to a week and a half later he's still tweeting about it and about all the stuff that's going on. It's like that was kind of an interesting thing to follow. Yeah, it seems really well regarded. Maybe worth an episode. I know I said that earlier, Tortuga. The other thing we didn't do a lot of in 2021 was make episodes. I think we only had 4.
Wait, really? Only 4? The whole year?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it was pretty light. I'm not sure I have a ton else to say about 2021 other than I feel like there might have been some games that are worth talking about that came out toward the end of the year. I know we talked about it in a previous episode briefly. Decisive Campaign Ardennes came out, and I know that was something that a lot of people liked. I just didn't play much of it. And I think there were a couple other games that came out toward the tail end of the year that might be worth looking at. But yeah, overall, I would say it's kind of a disappointing year. I hope that 2022 is not. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff that's just around the corner. And I guess the other one worth talking about or mentioning is War and These 2, which I just didn't get a ton of time to play it. That certainly is a big game that I think a lot of folks in the audience will enjoy. I'm not a big fan of the I go, you go system and sort of the way that they broke out the air phase from the ground combat phase and then the German phases from the Soviet phases. That, to me, it takes away some of the free-flowing nature of what I would expect a game covering a blitzkrieg in the Eastern Front to have. I think the counter to that is it makes the game easier to pick up, and for a game of this size and scope, you probably want to grab at every opportunity to make it easier to pick up and play for new folks. But that's another one of those games that I just didn't play a ton of. I would probably put it on a top list, but I'd have some reservations talking in too much detail about it. And yeah, so I think there's a couple of games that sort of fall into that late 2021 narrative.
I have 2 other games that people might want to at least know about that I thought were interesting from last year. One of them is Humankind, which too bad we don't have Charcoal Cheetah FinnishJager on the podcast. He could talk a little bit about that one.
Hey, I played this with you guys.
Oh yeah, you played the first game with us. What were your thoughts on it?
I didn't like it, but I don't really like the Civilization games to begin with all that much. They're just kind of okay. They never really grasped me or got my attention like they do for a lot of people. But Humankind was interesting for what it was. I think I just had fun playing with friends, though.
You know, another one that came out was Old World. And I was talking to some other people about it, and they told me that between the 2, Old World was supposedly better.
The other thing I played and actually quite liked that a few of us can talk, I guess me and Tortuga, was Diablo 2.
Wait a minute. Did you guys play this together too?
Yeah, we did play that together. We completed it together even.
That's right. Yeah, that was fun. I mean, that's a nice throwback.
Well, you guys can finish this podcast by yourselves. Bye.
Whoa. What else did we play together, Tortuga? Yeah, me and Tortuga do a lot of gaming together.
Yeah. Wolfpack got married. I was his best man. I mean,
yep.
Did you invite Tish? Oh shit. Sorry.
I'm not married, by the way.
That's what he wants you to think.
The divorce happened really quickly. That's all it was. Yeah, this is a highly functional podcast we have here.
One other game I played, a game which I was looking forward to quite a lot, and it was a real 2021 of a game, if you know what I mean. Was Evil Genius 2. It was mediocre. I think that it's funny. It's one of those games where it had everything that I thought I would like in a game, but somehow it didn't all come together. It was one of those where the whole is less than the sum of its parts. So I don't know why. I couldn't even I couldn't go and consult with them and tell them how to fix their game. But something was amiss there, and I don't know what. I can't really speak to why. But, it's still an entertaining game. It might even have been just expectations management. You have this battle when games are being released between the marketing department trying to be like, let's sell as many games as possible. And the game designers and probably developers being like, no, please don't promise the world where our game is this, and don't, people are going to have bad expectations if you market it as something else.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Sometimes, that just doesn't click.
I never played the original Evil Genius. I know you were a big fan of that, Tortuga, so I'm not sure I have a ton to say, but...
Yeah, no, I think that Evil Genius 2 was the perfect way to conclude our discussion about the year 2021, because I would say that 2021 was an Evil Genius 2 kind of year, less than the sum of its parts.
A year of meh.
And there is an interesting thought even behind it, why were the games so meh? Was it related to the pandemic? Was it just a bad roll on the die? And I know a lot of games got pushed out, but how much of that is pandemic? How much of it is it?
I think it's just because 2022 is going to be so good.
Great segue. We brought the right man on.
It kind of seems like it, based on all the games that we have a pretty good idea of what's coming out. I think every year I make these lists and I'm like, I go back and look at it a year and a half later. It's like half these games still aren't out. I think my 2019 list had games that still haven't released and whatnot. I think 2 of my 5 games in 2021 came out that year. So yeah, it seems like every year the games get pushed out, but at least the games I'm looking at seem to have a pretty high likelihood of coming out this year. So hopefully it's an exciting year.
Oh yeah, there's so much to talk about. We definitely need to dive into it. There's so many games coming out, and I think they're actually going to release this year too, which is a surprise in itself.
A lot of them seem to be targeting the beginning of the year, or at least several of them. But yeah, why don't we just jump in? Wolf, what are you looking forward to this year?
So I've decided I'm going to pick 3 games that the developers have stated they will be releasing this year. There's a statement. For example, I'm excited about Sea Power and Task Force Admiral, but I have a feeling Sea Power might come out this year just because it looks really far along and I'm super hyped for it, but they haven't come out and said Sea Power's coming out this year, so...
And we did an interview with the developer on this podcast last year. Yeah, last year. But for those of you who aren't aware, Superpower, I guess the best way to describe it, right, is kind of like a spiritual successor to Jane's Fleet Command.
Yeah, that's how I would pretty much describe it for sure.
So a real-time 3D environment with naval combat, air combat. I don't think there's any land combat, but you're presumably striking assets on land between various fleets during the missile era. What does that really mean?
You're just you're controlling ships with missiles. It's I think
so. World War III gone hot, Cold War-ish.
Yeah, 1980s time frame. I think for the most part. I'm not sure if they plan on having a 1960s campaign and stuff. Kind of like what Cold Water said. I'm in the minority where I think the 1960s campaign in Cold Waters was the most fun. I like it a lot, but
for someone like you who's really into subsims and a slightly slower pace, I could see why that would appeal to you. I think for someone like me who came to it and jumped into the 1980 campaign first, I may not have enjoyed it as much if I jumped straight into the 60s one. I think the 80s one was really interesting because it was just so fast-paced and frenetic. Mm-hmm. It felt like I was flying a fighter jet more times than not when I was moving my sub around, rather than a submarine. Which maybe that means I'm just a terrible captain, just blazing through the ocean at 30 knots and just
Whatever gets the job done, brother.
But yeah, the weapons are so much more lethal in that era. In the 60s, you've still got, unguided torpedoes that are in some subs. I mean, heck,
Yeah.
even in the 80s, the British sank the Belgrano in the Falkland War with unguided torpedoes.
Yeah.
But like the 80s is quasi-modern compared to like maybe what you have in the 90s or early 2000s.
Yeah, but I don't know. Just a lot of what they've been showing off has definitely excited me. Those games I'm anticipating them, but I guess I'm not going to talk about them a whole lot.
Well, now that we talked about what you don't want to talk about, what do you want to talk about?
Well, I could talk about them, but I guess one game that I'm interested in, and it's supposed, like it says on their Steam page, release date summer 2022, is Gunner Heat PC, which is a new tank simulation game. It's once again set during the Cold War, like the maps to Fold the Gap. So you have all the tanks you would think of during that time period: T-55s, T-72s, M60s, and of course the M1A1 Abrams. And they actually have a free demo, like a vertical slice you can play on their website. And if you support them on Patreon, you get the current build. So I've been supporting them on Patreon for quite a while now, and I've been meaning to make videos on this game because I do play around with it quite a lot. Go in, you shoot tanks. The ballistics are well done and all that good stuff. It doesn't have interiors and everything, which I think would be really cool, but I don't know. I guess some things had to be sacrificed in the face of variety, because they do have quite a lot of vehicles that are playable and stuff. So
this isn't going to be like World of Tanks, is it? Because I'm looking at some of the screenshots where they're showing the shell hit the outside of the tank, and then they've got that spidering
No, they're just showing all the spalling and stuff inside the tank, and what happens whenever your round hits a vehicle and stuff. They're just showing off the ballistics engine in those screenshots. I guess it is like War Thunder in the way you can control your tank in the third person, but they also have a kind of a commander's view, which I pretty much exclusively use.
So are you going to play with me in this? Because it's on my wish list too.
Oh, well, I'm pretty sure Wolf and I are going to be playing, but maybe we can make an exception.
I'm sure. I know they want to have online co-op, so I'm sure we could all play it together. But yeah, more tank games. I do like realistic tank sims, so yeah, that's one I am quite excited for, and one that I'm not sure a whole lot of people know about even. So
another game that I won't get invited to play. Okay, all right, I see.
I'll invite you to play it, and you know what? I definitely, like I said, I want to do some videos on it. So I'm just gonna, you know where to find me, dear viewers and listeners.
Wolfpack345 Live, is that what you are now?
Oh yeah, that is what I am now on Twitch.
Because people might not know, there is a space game I do want to talk about a little bit. I guess we'll just cycle in our own games that we're excited about. I have to mention Distant Worlds 2. I'm in the beta for it. I'm happy that we actually have THG. You have this. I'm sorry, Matt. You also have access to it, right? I mean, you could post some content yourself if you so desired.
I haven't played it really much yet. Life's been kicking my ass, but yeah, I have it, and I should play it because I'm definitely excited about it as well. But I think you are probably more qualified to talk about it than me.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, for people who aren't familiar with this game, obviously for those people who know Distant Worlds 1, this is Distant Worlds 2. It is the sequel. It is in every way the sequel. It is just a superior game from the original, pretty much better in every way. And I know that everybody I've talked to who's played, who's in the closed beta for Distant Worlds 2, who has gone back and tried to look at Distant Worlds 1, Distant Worlds Universe for various things, just to check out game mechanics, what was happening previously. Every single one of them has said that they can't play Distant Worlds 1 anymore. It's just not fun compared to how much fun Distant Worlds 2 is. But for those of you who don't know what it is, it's a Space 4X game. The game you are probably most familiar with in this category might be Stellaris. And Stellaris took a lot of its inspiration from the original Distant Worlds. And I think Distant Worlds 2 is actually, despite being basically a two-man team, I think it's going to be seriously competitive with Stellaris. Now, what are the downsides? It has no multiplayer. I mean, I think it'd be a great game to play multiplayer with Wolf, Finnish. We might even invite THG. Who knows?
They wouldn't.
Yeah.
I need to find new friends.
Yeah, I mean, anyway, it would be a lot of fun to play multiplayer. I could see this one being a blast. And I think that might detract from some people playing it. But if you're the kind of person who doesn't mind playing a Space 4X game single player, you should definitely check out some of the content of it. Distant Worlds 2, in my opinion, is probably going to be the go-to Space 4X game for me for years, probably years and years to come. So I'm very excited about it. And it's for sure going to release. The release date is March 10th, which is probably about the time this podcast comes out. But can I also throw on a few other some Sports 4X games that I think that other people might be interested in, games I'm not as familiar with. I know that there's Alliance of the Sacred Sons. I've heard a lot about this one. I just don't know enough to talk about it well, but everybody who I'm kind of part of the 4X community a little bit, and everybody in the 4X community is really looking at Alliance of the Sacred Sons. I think it's kind of like RPG Empire or Emperor. It's like Space 4X, but from the perspective of like role-playing. Somehow is mixed in there, so that'll be an interesting game. Also,
speaking of role playing, for Distant Worlds, one of the appealing things of the first game was that you could like automate almost everything, and just like in theory, I think I saw people even just only commanding like an individual fleet or ship, and they would like role play as like a captain or something like that. Can you still do that in Distant Worlds too?
Oh yeah, you can. Yeah, I mean, one of the most famous examples I think you're talking about is somebody played with the Star Trek mod, and they created a USS Enterprise, and they put everything in their empire on automated, so that basically the 4X game was still playing itself, so there was a living, breathing universe going on, galaxy happening, but this player only played as the Enterprise. They just took this one ship around.
Yo, that sounds awesome. That is pretty cool.
Yeah, so I mean, like, and Wolf, I know you lean, like, I know you don't do really space stuff on your channel, but like you do a lot of like role-playing type stuff. I really think Distant Worlds is something that might be worth checking out for you.
No, yeah,
because I think that's something that really causes it to stand out from Stellaris, is like Stellaris doesn't have a civil economy. Like, you're in control of everything. You can't really automate anything. Like Distant Worlds, I think there are similarities there. It's a deeper game. It's a more complex game, but they have civilian trade. They have automation. They have all these other things, and it's a much deeper, real feeling universe than I think a lot of other Space 4X games out there. I really think that's one of the things that causes it to stand out.
Oh yeah, that all actually sounds super appealing, because I definitely like RPG elements in games a lot. Like, I play a lot of RPGs like in my spare time or whatever, even though, maybe not as much anymore because of the channel, but no, yeah, that sounds awesome though.
Your IL-2 Captain Yuri goes to space.
Yeah, like I don't know, I implement RPG elements into games that aren't RPGs, so I don't know, that actually does sound appealing. That piqued my interest.
And to answer your question, THU, about the automation, I played fully manual in Distant Worlds 1, and I'm actually playing about half automated in Distant Worlds 2 because the automation is so good. It's actually, it's one of the reasons why it's kind of hard to go back to Distant Worlds universe, because the automation is so good for things. It's like I actually don't have an interest in playing some of those manual anymore, but you can still do the very in-depth ship design and all that. So yeah, I mean, Distant Worlds 2 it's definitely, I can almost proclaim it my game of the year already, but I'll wait until December 2022 before I make that official.
Okay, and sorry, you were talking about other Space 4X games.
Oh yeah, there's another one called, I don't know if this is a Space 4X, it's just a space game which is coming out I kind of have my eye on, Terra Invicta. Do either of you know anything about that?
No, but I got a lot of angry comments when it wasn't on my top 5 like strategy games of the year video on YouTube.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there were a bunch of people who were like, Terra Invicta, how could you not include this?
Yeah, I don't know enough about it to really rate it. I don't know where it would fall under my hype list. The thing is, this is the problem. We're, like, after such a bland 2021, 2022 is, like, so chocked full of great games. It's just impossible to follow all of them. So that's what I would say to any of the people who are like, why don't you have... Well, like, the thing is, if you have Terra Invicta, you're knocking something else off, right? So, but yeah, this is a grand, it's supposed to be like a Space 4X grand strat. I think it's actually more RTS. It reminds me a little bit of Homeworld 3, and by the way, did I mention Homeworld 3 is also supposed to come out in 2022.
Yeah.
Another space game that apparently I just saw just now is there's a Dune Spice Wars RTS.
Yeah, I saw that one too.
Yeah, I don't know anything about that one. I really don't know anything about that one.
It's not out yet.
One of the genres that I think is interesting that I'm excited about a game coming out is called Superpower 3, which I don't know if did any of you guys play like Superpower 1 or 2?
Oh my gosh, Superpower 2. I think I might be one of the people who most played that, even on YouTube. Like I played.
What do you think about that? Because that was like really cartoony, right?
Superpower 2 was not. I wouldn't say it was cartoony. I think that they had a huge problem with the AI, and that is basically everything I'm looking for in Superpower 3. I just really hope they get the AI right. It's one of those geopolitical simulators, right? The same way as there's the actual geopolitical simulator.
Realpolitik. There's a couple, two of those games.
Yeah, what's the other one? Supreme Ruler.
Supreme Ruler is, I feel like, a little bit more groggy, right? But yeah, I mean that Supreme Ruler always felt more directly wargamey than this, and I feel like
I agree.
I played a lot of Superpower 1 way back in the day. I didn't play 2 as much. I've got a disc of it, but I vaguely remember the marketing on it being like really cartoony, like.
Oh, okay. The actual game image for it being sold, that might I don't remember it being cartoony, but it wasn't like super high quality or anything.
Yeah.
But the gameplay itself was just very, very intensely deep. Like you were managing, you could get into the weeds. They had some really cool, they have so many cool ideas. I don't think the game all came together, so I really hope all of it works in Superpower 3. I'm not actually that optimistic that they'll be able to pull all these things together. They had all the big set. What are those treaties called between the top like 11 economic powers and all that?
Like the G11 or the World Trade Organization, or like I don't know what.
Yeah, G11,
the World Bank, World Monetary Fund, or
exactly. They had the IMF there. They have all these things actually put into the game, and there's a diplomatic like use for them. You know, they actually do some kind of distribution of economics and all that. I mean, I'm just throwing out words, but I'm trying to impress people with the fact that this stuff is supposedly in the game. It's just, I don't think it was done perfectly.
Yeah, and I'm not sure, I guess it's on my list because it piqued my interest. Realpolitik 2 came out this year, like 2021, actually. Geopolitical simulation comes out like every year. Geopolitical simulation's usually kind of a little bit buggy and a little bit just the same game year after year. But I guess I'm just interested in Superpower 3 because I played a lot of the first one. It seems like there's a modest amount of effort being put behind it. We don't know a ton about it yet, but I really enjoyed the series. And I think one of the things that really is missing in gaming in general, there's just not a lot of games about diplomacy and like modern settings for like these kind of world building games. Like you've got the Space 4X stuff, which deals with the future. You've got a lot of war games, which deal with like historical conflicts. You have Paradox games, which deal with like the past and the future, I guess, was Stellaris. But like you don't have a lot of games that say like, hey, here's the world you live in. Now interact with it. And I think part of that's because like the modern world is like so diplomacy centric. That it's hard to do. You have some games that look inward, like Democracy, that series, but there's not a ton of games that like really go and look at the international scene. I think those 3 games that we mentioned, Realpolitik, Global Worlds, or whatever, Conflict Simulator, and Superpower, like those are the 3 series I can think about. And I really would like to see more games do that. Like have more games that make diplomacy matter, that make trade matter, that make the world that we all live in interesting. And maybe people don't want that. Maybe people want to escape from reality. But I think it's interesting. I used to do some forum-based role-playing games that would kind of look at the modern era, and I'm sure they're all terrible if you're looking at them from a realism perspective. But I think it would be interesting to be in the chair, if you will, or be a ruler of a country and trying to deal with all the challenges that we deal with in from a ruling a country perspective, with obviously game elements thrown in to make it interesting and fun and not, making you want to pull your hair out. So I'm excited to see this series get a rebirth. I think it's the first Superpower game that's coming out in quite a while. When was the last one? Like over 10 years ago?
Yeah, a long time. Fun fact, the reason why they didn't make Superpower 3 earlier is because the team, I know this team so well. It's Golem Labs. I used to live on their forum trying to figure out when the next AI mod was going to come try to save the game. They were making the Guild 3.
I mean, I know the name. I haven't played it.
No.
Where you basically run a business in a European town in the 1700s or 1800s.
Oh, no, I haven't heard of that. That actually sounds kind of interesting, though.
Yeah, it's a little goofy. It's a little wonky, but it's fun. Yeah, but I was disappointed, of course, because I was hoping to see Superpower 3 come out. They made the decision to work on Guild 3 instead.
So anyway, I'm excited just to see what comes of that. I don't know if it'll come out this year or not, but hopefully it does, and I'd like to see that genre sort of explored a little bit more.
Let's cycle back to Wolf then.
Oh boy, I mean, you're definitely going to notice a theme with my next 2 games, and maybe even the last one. My number 2 game that I'm excited for is called Destroyer the U-Boat Hunter. It puts you in command of a Fletcher class destroyer during the Second World War, and you pretty much just protect a convoy from U-boats. It's supposed to come out this year. Their Steam page says Q1 2022. I don't know how realistic that really is.
Well, they've got 6 weeks left.
Yeah, so I mean, it would be great if it did. That'd be cool, because there were 2 demos in 2021 for this game, and it's like a 1-hour demo. You're a Fletcher, and you have 1 U-boat to deal with, and it's very simulation heavy. Like, you man the sonar. It's a lot like Destroyer Command, which was released, 2003.
That was a Ubisoft game, right? That came out in parallel with, I think, Silent Hunter 2, was it?
Yep, exactly. So that's the last time you've had a destroyer-focused simulation, and it does it quite well. You do all the plotting yourself, although they have added aids for people who don't care to do the plotting, but I think plotting your target and, lining up the perfect depth charge run is quite a lot of fun. And it's a single-player game, which, in this age of, everything being multiplayer, I'm kind of glad it's single-player. That's kind of an unpopular opinion, but it would be cool for co-op, but I'm glad the devs, are sticking to their guns and have a focus. But yeah, the demo was great. They came out with a 1-hour demo, and I played that demo like crazy. I have a few videos on my channel, me playing it, and I don't know. It was probably the most fun I have had playing a game all last year, and it was a 1-hour demo. So that's why it's number 2 on my slot, because, I don't know, the game was a blast, and I'm excited to see what the devs cook up.
I know that feeling, by the way, because one of my favorite gaming experiences from last year was also a demo. It was that Arms Trader Tycoon Tanks game.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I know what you mean, but unfortunately for me and for anybody else waiting, that one's not coming out at least for another year. So we have a long wait ahead of us, I think.
I can't believe they're saying that's not coming out until 2023. Based on where the demo was at, it feels like the core mechanics of the game are there. What are you doing for the next 18 months?
Well, it's a little bit weird, too, because I don't really understand their funding scheme or what's going on, but that's probably that's a podcast we've already talked about. And
we have a publisher, but we're doing a Patreon, but now we're also doing we also did a Kickstarter.
They have a patron, too? Oh.
Or it's about to go live. I'm not sure which, but
that's kind of odd.
They got a lot of fishing lines in the water.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. That's weird.
So let me jump in with another game I'm excited about then. I think that you already mentioned this, but Power, I thought for sure that this one was going to be released in 2022. I don't know why for sure. It's not for sure, I guess, but the buzz around the town, right, is that it's coming out this year, right?
I feel like it's a 2022 thing, but in the Microprose Discord, it says to be announced.
Yeah, that's true.
So I was just I might as well choose some games that maybe some people, or at least I haven't talked about on the podcast, because I'm pretty sure last time I came on, I brought up Power anyway.
Yeah, it's one of those where we keep talking about it. What was the other one? Burden of Command.
And Task Force Admiral.
Yeah, well, Task Force Admiral is definitely, I don't see that one coming out.
Well, then, I don't know, because I'm excited for Power and Task Force Admiral. Super hyped. Those are definitely 2 games I'm really excited about, but I wasn't sure about this year.
It actually sounds a lot like, did we already talk about Modern Naval Warfare?
Oh no, that was number 1 on my list.
I might actually be more hyped about modern naval warfare. Kind of came out of nowhere for me, but I like it, and hopefully Sea Power comes out soon, because my hype might be slowly bleeding from one to the other at this point.
There's just so much coming. There has been a drought of naval games for the past decade, I feel like, and now we're getting hit with multiple, all at the start of this decade. So
Yeah, I mean, I think it started with Rule the Waves, and then you had Cold Waters, and then you had Rule the Waves 2, and maybe someday Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts and War on the Sea. And
yeah, I guess when you put it that way, it sounds like there were more, but I guess, I don't know. Okay, naval simulations.
What? That's not, I don't know if that's a game.
Yeah, anyway, because I think Silent Hunter, 5 came out in 2010, 2011. And then I guess I got Cold Waters, but Rule of Waves never really grabbed me like it did y'all. So anyway, modern naval warfare, modern submarine simulation, it's comparable to Dangerous Waters, which was released by Sonalist in 2005. So it released like around the same time of Silent Hunter 3 for reference. And Silent Hunter 3, I think, has aged much better. But yeah, modern naval warfare, you're going to have a 3D con of a Virginia-class submarine. The initial release, theater is the South China Sea. And of course, you can control the con, target motion analysis, sonar, you have your waterfall displays and all that good stuff. That is all simulated, which is pretty cool in my opinion. And something we haven't had in a long time.
Was it surprising to you, by the way, that this one came out published under... Is it under Slytherin or Matrix? It's under Slytherin?
It's under Slytherin on the Steam page, but I thought it was Matrix. But
it seems like it belongs under Matrix. Is just for those of you who aren't familiar. The split, I mean, it's not really a split. They're both the same. They're both under the bigger umbrella of Slytherin, but the way they market their games is the more accessible to the broad public, the less hardcore niche wargamey, those go to Slytherin, and the more simulation wargame type stuff goes to Matrix. The hardcore, yeah, that's the way it's been explained to me that that's how they divvy up their products. So you can kind of get a feel for what their target audience is based on who's which of the two is attached to it.
And I guess also I played a very early demo of this game, so it's not really representative of what it is now, and that may be one of the reasons I'm pretty hyped for this, because I've actually touched it, So, no, yeah, looks great. Super excited. It's going to have co-op, so me and Tortuga can play together.
Honey, can you see me? Am I here? Do I exist?
And yeah, because we've played Dangerous Waters together, so we'll be just at home.
Hello.
This is a good little bit. This is a comedy, I think is what they call it.
I don't want to be riding the Microprose ticket too much, but what about Regiments, which is also slated to come out in 2022? Did either of you guys have a thought about that one? First of all, do you think it's actually going to be released in 2022?
I think so.
Yeah, I think so. Have both of you played the demo?
I have not. I've only watched gameplay video of it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I have not. Yeah,
better have watched my gameplay video of it, but yeah, no, I'm not a big fan of the Wargame series. It's too much clicky. I don't know. It's just like a click fest, and it's so fast paced.
And we've played that a whole bunch. It's probably a game we should invite TSG to play with us at some point.
Yeah, we've played it.
I have played with you guys.
I wouldn't say I've played it. I've more suffered through it is what I feel like, but I don't know.
Yeah, I have a strong opinion about it.
Can anybody hear me? Seriously, what the fuck?
I have a strong opinion about it. I think that the problem with these games is they spend all this development time and graphical going, all the amount of investment into good graphics so that they can sell the game. But then when you actually play it, unless you play it like I do, just co-op against the AI, you have no time to watch a single missile hit a target. It's just crazy. It reminds me a little bit of StarCraft, where you cannot actually observe the fight because you have to multitask and micromanage. And I hate that. That's why I'll play it on an easier difficulty. I don't PvP, because I really like to enjoy watching my tanks sit on their line and fire their guns. I mean, that's part of the experience for me, watching the damn game.
Well, but Regiments doesn't have multiplayer, so that's going to be interesting if that's the case, because I do agree with you. I think one of the things that pulls a lot of people into the war game series is the multiplayer aspect, be it competitive or co-op, but Regiments is single player only.
And like out of all of the reason I brought that up is because out of all these games, war game-esque games I've played, I think I liked Regiments the most. And I think a lot of that has to actually do with the setting. Again, Cold War, Fulda Gap, I don't know. I guess that setting's pretty appealing to me compared to like Wargame Red Dragon, where it's not nearly as interesting to me. I should mention there's another Wargame-esque type game called Broken Arrow coming out.
Well, there was also Warno that just released, right?
Oh, yeah.
I will say that Broken Arrow is interesting because I think if you look at the Wargame-esque games, Regiments is like, all right, we can do a better single-player campaign than what Eugen Systems, who's the developer of the Wargame series, does. So, like, let's lean into that. Then you've got the Broken Arrow game, which is published by Slytherin, or going to be published by Slytherin, which seems to be, I think, they're going more the multiplayer route. I could be wrong on that, but that was my impression, is that it was more like, we're going to go for the multiplayer aspect. And then you've got Warno, which is, I don't know if it was like rushed to quickly release to get out ahead of Broken Arrow and Regiments or not, but it's the newest of the Eugen games, and it feels like they kind of threw it out there with a lot less content than they usually do, just under the gaze of early access, to be like, well, it's okay, there's not much in here yet, it's early access. But it kind of makes you wonder, with like Regiments on the horizon and with Broken Arrow on the horizon, did they decide to just release early with what they had so they could get out ahead of these other games and maybe make sure to hold that market share?
It's not a bad idea for them, I think, because first of all, they already have an engine which works, right? It's not like they're creating something from scratch, so they probably have the capability to rush something to launch. And I don't think that they're going to be able to compete with these other two games if they were all released at the same time, so that's kind of a negative viewpoint towards Warno, but in my opinion, based on that, I think they did the right thing.
Well, the interesting thing with Warno is they do single player and multiplayer, and I will say that like Red Dragon single player felt like blah to me, but some of the earlier games like Wargame Red Dragon, some of the earlier games like Wargame Air Land Battle, I think had pretty interesting campaigns, and I guess they're trying to bring, because they also made the Steel Division games, they're trying to bring the general mode over from Steel Division and put it into Warno. So I don't have a strong opinion on Warno yet. I haven't really played it yet, and it's also like still so early in development, but there's a lot of these kind of games coming out.
I did actually, I guess I did enjoy Steel Division a bit, or Steel Division 2 a bit more, just because it was a bit slower. But no, yeah, looking forward to Regiments. Single player's cool.
Let's actually jump back to THG, because I feel like there's one game I don't want to beat you to the punch on, but we haven't talked about, and it's like the elephant in the room at this point, in my opinion.
Oh, I've got at least two more games. All I've talked about so far is Superpower.
Yeah, let's jump to you, because there's one of yours I really want to talk about, but I want to let you deliver the first blow.
Tiny Combat Arena?
No way.
Is that one of yours?
Yes.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I wanted to talk about it, but I guess I felt like I needed to cut my list was quite long.
I'm excited about Tiny Combat Arena, and we'll get to the other game you want to talk about soon, Tortuga. But I don't want to I feel like that's going to be a little bit of a bigger topic for me. I think Tiny Combat Arena looks really cool. It's like a flight sim, but it's almost going the direction that like a lot of the retro 8-bit games type go to. It's not 8-bit, but like it has this very clear sort of late 90s or maybe mid 90s like vibe to it in terms of the graphics. I don't know if you agree with that or not, Wolfpack, but it feels very pixel art kind of graphic-y.
I think the art design is awesome.
It is awesome, but it definitely feels retro. Wouldn't you agree with that? Like, it's not going for photorealism.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so, like, I don't know. It feels like it's kind of a love letter or an homage to, like, some of the original Microprose games back in the day, because of the way it looks. And I love the idea. You only get to fly a Harrier, right?
Right. That is going to be the only flyable aircraft. At least at launch. I don't know if they have plans for anything after that, but I'm pretty sure only the Harrier will be flyable.
Okay. So yeah, and I mean, it just looks like, it looks like what you think of when you think of Microprose. So it makes sense that they're going to be the publisher. Does it have a campaign? That's one thing I'm unclear on.
I'm honestly not too sure about that. I know they have like a quick mission builder and stuff, so you can like make your own missions and stuff like that. I'm not sure if they're going to have a campaign. It is releasing into early access, so I guess it is possible. Maybe that'll happen down the road. I'm sure we'll get clarification on that though after this goes live.
I hope so. Like, it feels a little bit like Gunship. I don't know if you ever played the old Gunship game, but like that kind of reminds me of that. That was obviously a helicopter sim, but like I've got that vibe looking at it and just seeing like, you know, the Harrier cruise down and drop cluster munitions on like a large array of tanks that are moving across the battlefield. It just looks like everything I remember Microprose looking and feeling like back in the day, and I think is really cool. And I'd like to see some developers take a look at this, like making deep games or worlds, but like you don't need to break the bank on you know, making everything look photorealistic. If you have a creative and interesting art style, I think it can work out.
You know, it's funny that you talked about the art style and all that, because I disliked this game when I looked at it because it reminded me too much of Carrier Command, which I think had this not quite the same, but yeah, maybe a similar art style, and I just did not like that game. So I'm worried that we're looking at...
You mean Carrier Command 2? The recent Microprose release?
Yeah, Carrier Command 2. Yeah, it looks to me a lot like Carrier Command 2, and I didn't like Carrier Command 2, so that has jaded my perspective on this one.
I didn't dislike Carrier Command, or oh my god, Carrier Deck or Carrier Command, whatever.
No, Carrier Command 2. Yeah.
I didn't dislike Carrier Command 2 because of the art, though.
No,
I think Carrier Command 2 failed because it didn't do like...
It was empty.
It was an empty world, and it was just kind of like there's a bunch of these islands that you sail around to, and you've got to take them all over. It was very grindy, and then it was just kind of like... It was, like you said, it was empty, and the mechanics were not well suited unless you were playing in a large group of people. So it was like clearly built for large player co-op, but no one's going to play like 20 hours of co-op where you're doing the exact same thing over and over and over and over again. Like the game didn't have enough variety or push back on you enough. So I think there were core design problems.
I guess I don't see the art styles as being the same. I think this like definitely is aiming for, like THD said, that, you know, or mid 90s retro feel, like similar to like, what was it, Jane's F-18, I think. Oh yeah, I mean it looks like the F-19 stealth bomber. I mean, yeah, I feel it, and yeah, it's hard for me to... It takes an effort for me to suppress the nostalgia, the rose-tinted glasses, which makes me want to like the game. But I was just so disappointed by the Carrier Command 2 release. And I don't know, you're right, probably the graphics aren't exactly the same, but it was representative enough that I feared that this was another attempt. Like, it's a different engine, right? It's a different development team than... Oh yeah, this is developed by, I'm pretty sure, just a guy. I've been following this project for a while before it was even picked up by Microprose. Like, okay, that's good. Yeah, no, yeah, definitely interested in it. Definitely looking forward to playing it this month, right? February 22nd, so we'll see if the podcast is out before that. I was actually surprised that TSG brought this game up, though, versus Wolfpack. I thought for sure Wolfpack was going to bring this up. It would have been my number 4 if I talked about 4 games. It's on here, but... Let's just jump right to THG's other one, because I've been waiting.
But to circle back to what you were prodding at earlier, Tortuga, I would say, like, if I was, I guess this list is kind of in no particular order, but if I was to list a number 1, for me anyway, it would probably be Victoria 3, which I think might be a controversial topic, but also is like, it's been a game that I think so many people have been looking forward to so long, and it finally got announced by Paradox last year. They haven't announced a release date yet, but their history usually would imply that, like, based on when it was announced, it's probably going to be a late 2022 release. You know, we'll see, but I would guess. Why do you say controversial? I think it's controversial because of some of the design decisions they made with the game. Like, they're you know... Oh, okay, yeah. Paradox does, of all the companies that do strategy games... Paradox does an immaculate job with their developer diaries. Like, they give you a sense of what you're going to be playing before you play it. For better or worse, Slytherin and Matrix don't put that much effort behind it, or just don't. Maybe they don't have the resources. I don't know, but they don't do a ton with dev diaries, and I don't think any of the other strategy companies really do either. Like Paradox puts an immaculate amount of effort behind their developer diaries. And so they've been releasing information about how, pops are going to be handled, like different groups of the population, how goods in the economy are going to work, how the military is going to work. And I think as they've released a lot of this, what's become clear to me, and I think a lot of people, is fundamentally they're approaching Victoria 3, which is a game about, Victorian, not England, but the world. So from like the 30s to, I guess technically they're expanding the date all the way to the beginning of World War II, or beginning of the rise of Nazi Germany, to like 1933, which I think is like a decade later than the original Victorias were. But it's basically that age of imperialism, if I was going to give the game another name. And I think one of the things that a lot of people have noticed is that, like, this is a game they're trying to make about social changes in this era. The development of labor unions, the development of socialism as sort of a concept and an idea, the impact of revolutions on Europe and the world, and they've leaned away from making it a game about war. War exists, you conquer colonies and things like that. Navies exist, but they've seemingly abstracted a lot of that away in the vein of making this a social, political, economic sim, perhaps more than a military game. And I think, for a lot of people, probably the previous Victoria games were to many people map painters, because the age of imperialism in many ways was about painting the map of the world in the European country of your choosing. So I think that's going to be something that a lot of people look at, and hopefully it doesn't get the Imperator treatment. Maybe it gets a little bit of the Hearts of Iron 4 treatment, where when it came out, there was a lot of complaints that it was overly streamlined and simplified for the masses. But I don't know. I guess we'll see.
Oh, yeah. First of all, I'm very, very excited about it. Some of their decisions are interesting. Gosh. So I think the biggest one to talk about is the fact that they're actually making it so that you don't control your army at all. And this has kind of been a steady progression for Paradox, and probably a topic for like its own podcast. But I'm a person who has always enjoyed controlling my individual armies. And in Hearts of Iron 4, most recently, they have this front command, and they actually penalize you if you manually control your armies and don't use the planning, don't use the AI and all this. So if you just want to control your own forces from a god perspective, they penalize you for that. And now it's gotten, and by the way, one of the reasons why you might want to control your own forces is because Paradox AI for these fronts has been pretty notoriously bad. I mean, it's a very difficult problem. I think it's extremely difficult to solve. So I sympathize. But, if your AI is very bad, there's a couple ways you can go. First of all, you can try to fix it, I guess. You can make it so that the human also has to play with an AI, so there's no advantage to the player's army. Or you can penalize the player and let them play with their army. So that's what they've gone with the last one in the Hearts of Iron 4. But now in Vicky 3, they're going with this where they essentially take control out of the player's hands. And they've done it because they wanted to focus more on the government, as you mentioned. It'll be interesting to see how that all works out. I'm still definitely looking forward to the game, but maybe I'm a little bit, as anybody should be, I'm a little leery about whether or not that's going to be executed well. I have to say, in using your armies and like defeating them, the enemies in battles, when you I right-click there and I got there and my army did it, it's just a lot more personal, and it feels a lot more. It's much more satisfying when you control your armies and you win, rather than you just get some pop-up which says, "Oh, by the way, our nation won some battle." I just feel like maybe that's intentional, but it'll remove the player a little bit from the military going-ons. So we'll see how that works out.
I think it'll be interesting because Crusader Kings got rave reviews and was very well guarded. But before that, they had a bit of a rocky track record. Imperator was not well received at all. So much so that that's the first just outright failure of a game of theirs from a commercial perspective. They've already moved resources away from it, which they don't usually do that fast. And I think there's elements of Imperator around like population management, which felt Victoria-esque in it. But I wonder, part of me wonders if they're just trying to say, listen, we want this game to be about managing a government in this era from a social perspective. And yes, militaries exist, and yes, wars exist, and you're going to have to manage that to an extent. You're not going to micromanage the military, but like it is a cost, right? It is an important factor. But really, we know we want this game to be about this era and government and society and economy. And military is an end to serve that. But from a game design perspective, it feels like to me they're saying we know what we want this to be and we want to make this a tight, focused design of a game. And I have a hard time criticizing a developer for that. I think too often, especially in the strategy world, developers don't make decisions about design and they just open everything up. And some people like that. And I also think it's what keeps the genre a little bit smaller, is because if you're just everything, it's not possible to do, I don't think, a great job when you just open everything up and make everything just free for all and you can literally micromanage everything. Because then I think games often, maybe not always, but often struggle to be great at any one thing. I think when you look at games that have a tighter focus, though, they tend to do better. And you could look at the Total War series, for example, of that. Total War Empire, Let's Do the World. Total War Napoleon, much more successful. We're just going to do Napoleon.
Warhammer 3.
By the way, speaking of which, that's my final game that I wanted to bring up. That Total War Warhammer 3. Are you going to play that, Wolf?
Yeah, I need to get into the Warhammer games. It's funny because I like the historical Total Wars, the older ones anyway. And I like Warhammer, but I haven't played Warhammer Total War. Like I played the tabletop stuff, or I did. I just haven't made the jump to playing Warhammer Total War, but I need to.
I think that Total War Warhammer 2 would have been or 1 and 2 together somehow, would have been my third favorite Total War game of all time. Obviously, Rome Total War number 1, and then...
Yeah, that's probably my ranking, too.
Shogun 2.
I'd probably put Medieval 2... Actually, I would go Rome 1 Barbarian Invasion as number 1, but not Rome 1 Vanilla. And then I would go with...
All right, we've had this debate before.
And I'm right, but...
Second podcast, another podcast, bring us on and we'll just wail on each other.
Is this why you don't invite me to your fun?
Well, you just have such a dumb opinion.
And then I'd say Medieval 2 is number 2, and then probably Napoleon is number 3.
Yeah, I think Shogun 2 is...
Yeah, Shogun 2 is amazing.
Yeah. I wanted to say... I actually played a lot of the original Barbarian Invasion because my little brother broke my original Rome Total War disc. So I was forced to sludge through Barbarian Invasion all the time.
He did you a favor. Attila was actually pretty good too. So like Rome 2 was bad, but Attila was good.
Yeah, Rome 2's turned around, and I did like Attila as well.
I just think when Creative Assembly tries to do everything, they struggle. And when they say, like, we're going to do this narrow period of history or this slightly smaller geographic area, they do much better.
Well, I think that Warhammer would have been maybe a counterpoint to that. Warhammer is just so out there. I mean, I don't know. It's so everything. Yeah, it's got, like, 9? I don't even know how many different... Like, this is not... Okay, a lot of the games they have, there's a bit of asymmetry to it. They try to promote the asymmetry, but it's all humans fighting humans, right? But then you have Warhammer 2 where it's the 40k universe where the sides are so completely different. It makes for... Yeah,
you have like just regular Bretonians against like vampire counts or like Tomb Raiders.
It's a blast. Why haven't you played it yet?
I know, I need to.
Well, here it is, Warhammer 3.
I've never played anything Warhammer at all.
Really?
The extent of my Warhammer knowledge is going into a couple of hobby shops looking for models and seeing like, oh, there's this Warhammer 40k stuff exists.
Oh. Well, I'll tell you what, Wolf.
Oh yeah, I love.
You get Warhammer 3. I'll get Warhammer 3, and maybe we can get a little multiplayer going on.
Yeah, that sounds like a great. I actually think I bought Warhammer 2. Oh, no, I didn't.
I don't care if you guys don't invite me to that one. That's fine.
Oh, really? Huh.
Oh, I do have Warhammer 2. We should just play that together. A little, appetizer before Warhammer 3 comes out.
I really enjoy it. I mean, do you have 1 and 2? Because that was one of the things. They had the better world map, but only if you had both.
Yeah. All right. You know what? Add to cart. You have convinced me already.
But you mentioned, actually, kind of sorry to jump back to Vicky 3 for another moment. You mentioned this about, well, it's kind of the same thing with the Total War universe, that when they do too much, they kind of fail. To bring this full circle, I would say that actually even more relevant counterpoint to that is Distant Worlds 2, where you can really do a little bit of almost anything in that game. And it's still somehow, I mean, you can turn off the parts you don't want and it still is successful, which is why I'm sure it's my favorite game. I mean, it's going to be my favorite game of 2020. So what game are you most excited about? Just, I don't know if it was clear to everyone.
I'm most excited about Victoria 3. And I also think like the micromanagement of the military thing is going to be one of those release day things. But honestly, let's be real with Paradox. There's always going to be a million DLCs. And I suspect once they have a bunch of people who have bought the game and are in the universe and experiencing it, they will expand some of these streamlined functionalities and say, okay, now that we've got, 2 million people playing this game, let's start adding some stuff. They've played the base game. They want some extra stuff. And one of those things I think they are going to dive into down the line is probably militaries, because that's just going to be an easy thing to be like, all right, let's build this out. Let's flesh this out a bit more.
I think you're too right. You can look at the difference between Hearts of Iron 3 and Hearts of Iron 4. Hearts of Iron 4 has basically, since its release, taken strides to essentially become Hearts of Iron 3. But Paradox is smart. They realize that if you give somebody like the in-depth, complex details right from the get-go, it seems like too grognardy and it drives people off, puts people off from the game. So now they're smart about it. Not only do they start with a less complex game, but when they move more complex, they do it with DLC too. So it's really a win-win for them. They get more of the mainstream sucked into their initial game, and then they slowly, reel them in, hook, line, and sinker to the more complicated things that people like me were waiting for the whole time and were kind of disappointed about it not being in there to begin with.
I think that's maybe a little bit, the way you phrased it anyway, it comes off a little more negatively and nefarious than I think it is intended. Like a development company probably wants a game to be approachable that a lot of people are going to enjoy. But then, once people are playing it and enjoying it or not, then they look to improve it and enhance it. And I think once you've learned the basics of a game, once you've learned the basic mechanics, it's easier to layer in complexity at that point. And people can choose to engage with it or purchase it at that point. I don't, obviously if they make more money that way, then it's a smart business decision from that perspective. But I don't think anyone's looking at the game to say like, we're going to intentionally limit it so that the grogs aren't happy. I think they're looking at it and saying like, how do we make a tight game that is easy to pick up and play, that expands our audience, that makes more people interested in a topic. And, once that's out there, then they say, okay, now that we've done this and now that people are familiar with this, let's add some interesting new mechanics to the game in a way that, refreshes the game in people's mind. And it just so happens to be that the gaps that, a sizable chunk of people are going to want is going to be military. And so they layer in complexity at that point. But I think it's more of a not a convenience. I think it's more of they have a clear design decision, but that decision leaves obvious gaps or areas for improvement, which when they decide maybe it doesn't need to be as tightly designed and we can expand and add complexity, this is one of those areas that they can do that.
I think that makes sense, and I generally agree with that.
I just think a lot of people look at Paradox and they're like, oh, they're just trying to milk users for all the money, and obviously they're a business and want to make money. But
well, I mean,
they're a business and they're trying to make money. But I don't think they deliberately make a game that's worse to do it, right?
They're trying to make money. I think. Well, so you mentioned it. They didn't intentionally. No, they just don't care about I don't think that they care about the non-mainstream. So they probably look at who is going to buy this game, and they think, okay, somebody who's a grognard, somebody who's more interested in the Hearts of Iron 3 type thing, what other game can that person go to and play anyway, right? The Hearts of Iron 3 it's like the only grand strategy World War II game like Hearts of Iron is. It's kind of unique. There's no place else we can really turn. So of course I'm interested in Hearts of Iron 4, because the only thing I can do besides that is go back to Hearts of Iron 3. But while you do it, you can also be like, okay, well, how do we bring in more people? And if our game decision happens to not please the loyal fan base as much, let's go ahead and take that risk, because we have shareholders to please and we have money to be made. And that is the Paradox spirit.
How did you feel about Crusader Kings 3? What was 3?
I liked it. I thought it was really good at launch.
I really liked it.
Yeah, I liked it a lot too. And I guess it was simpler than CK2, but that's the reason I really got into it. So,
but I would also say that, like, I think CK fits what I'm trying to say is that I think they know what CK is about and what people like about it. They know that CK is a storytelling experience of running. Like, it's an RP game. It's a game about generating role playing and stories. And so they lean heavily into that, and maybe they simplify certain things, but they know this is the experience we want to design. And I think what they're really saying about Victoria is, like, yes, some people like the military, but honestly, like, I think a huge portion of what they're trying to say is, like, this era was about social development. It was an era about economic development, and it was an area about expanding borders. But, like, until you get to 1914, was it really an era about, like, big moving tactical armies?
Yeah, it wasn't like there was a civil war or anything going on.
Yeah, but so there was an American Civil War, which this game is not American centric. There was the the Crimean.
Oh, you had the Franco-Prussian War.
Yeah, but in terms of, like, massive conflicts between great powers, I think it's a relatively minimal period until World War I.
And that's what all the histories say. That's what if you look at histories, they will say from 1815 and the fall of Napoleon until 1914, there was no global war. And, like, that's the narrative, is that there was 100 years of peace, which is bullshit, because you just pointed out there were a bunch of wars. But that's the narrative that history is painted about that era, is that it was an era of European peace, which, compared to the eras that came before it, you could argue was true. And so I think what they're saying is, like, the Victorian era is known for, in the Industrial Revolution, it's known for, women getting the right to vote. It's known for the spread of democracy. Like, and yes, imperialism was a big part of that, and conquering, foreign lands or other peoples was a big part of that. But, like, it wasn't about tactical maneuvers or big armies sweeping across Africa. It was like these small little detachments that were doing a lot of this. And so I think if you want to make that argument, you can. I think it'll be interesting to see how it's received, because, I think a lot has changed since they made a game that was about colonialism and genocide, like EU4. Like, they haven't made a game quite like this in a while. And I think the general public's tolerance for a mainstream game like this will be interesting to gauge.
I guess, like, I find the concept of not focusing on conflict as much to be actually rather refreshing. Like, how many war games do we really need? I mean, it's like, I think it's actually kind of cool that they've decided to go this route instead of making it another game about building armies.
It kind of ties in with THG's thought earlier about the geopolitical simulators that we have. So I agree with that. And I also just wanted to step back and say that I'm kind of putting myself into a corner and representing positions that I don't really even fully believe in. So first of all, I don't believe that, I know Paradox is a business, but I actually think that they do release really good games. And I don't think that they're doing things maliciously. I actually think that they particularly care about their community, or at least they've done a good enough marketing job, or they've done something good enough that that's the impression I have, whether or not it's true or not, or maybe other people disagree. But so I think that Paradox cares, and I like them experimenting. It's actually nice to see them experiment. So yeah, I'm looking forward to Vicky 3. We'll find out after maybe a couple months after release if this was a success. We'll see if it gets DLC or not.
When's that one supposed to come out?
We don't know, but I'm guessing what did they announce it, like middle of last year? Usually they announce games like about a year before they come out, or a little bit more, like maybe back half of next year. They've already got 30 dev diaries on this thing, or 32. So, like, I'm expecting, I can't imagine it would be another, 14 months or 12 months between the now and release. I'm expecting it's probably going to be right ahead of the holiday period, or late summer is what I would guess. But we'll see. I don't know. I could be wrong.
I know this podcast is getting a little long in the teeth here, but let me just throw out one other thing that I have looked at and I'm extremely excited about. I don't know how I didn't discover this, because I think this is one of the most wishlist games on Steam. But have either of you taken a look at Manor Lords?
It's supposed to be kind of like a Mountain Blade meets Crusader Kings type of thing, right? And
Yeah, and plus city builder, plus tactical. I mean, it's crazy that it's like a one-man dev, and you look at the game and it looks like pretty polished. It surprisingly looks like really good. But I mean, if you look up Manor Lords release date, which I did before this podcast, I got, oh yeah, it's they're looking at trying to get it out early 2020. So obviously the release date for this is very much up in the air. We have no idea when it'll be released, but I don't know. It looks really cool, and I've actually seen the developer has released videos of him like training his AI to do different formations and stuff. But I mean, the reach of this game is pretty big. City builder, economics, all those things, plus tactical combat. It kind of reminds me of one of those old Impressions games mixed with like a Total War game. So
I think that about wraps up everything I've got to talk about. Does anybody have anything left?
oh, it's just been a pleasure and an absolute joy to be on this podcast once again. I really hope you bring me back.
You sound like a man who is experiencing joy.
I just really need the money.
We're not paying him anything.
No, I'm joking. It was. I'm not getting paid. It's just fun. Finally getting around to. I mean, we never game together, so it's nice to finally talk to you again, THG.
Okay. Tortuga, can you hear me?
yeah, no, thanks for. I think it was a great podcast. Looking forward to gaming with Wolf later on tonight, and I'm really looking forward to, sincerely, 2022. And I think it'll be pretty fun to look back in December of this year and actually try to pick out what were the best games. And one of my problems is just going to be, how do I have time to play them all?
And we'll see what actually came out.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of these games also, they're not exactly the light variety, right? They're all games that require a fair bit of commitment. So I think finding time to play them all is going to be a challenge. I'm curious to see how Victoria is received. I really am, because I kind of already know there's going to be a segment people are going to be like, bah, this sucks, it's not detailed or whatever enough. But, you know, they had that with Hearts of Iron 3 and Hearts of Iron 4, and it still ended up seemingly being pretty successful.
No, I think it's different because the people who liked Vicky 2 are probably the people who didn't. Well, anyways, let's talk about Vicky 2 and Vicky 3 another time. But I think I don't see that as much, just because the Vicky 2 people are more about the economics anyway. So I think that this move might actually appeal to them.
I think that's true for a sizable percentage of people. But I mean, even on my top 5 videos of the upcoming year on my YouTube channel, I got a fair bit of like, Vicky's gonna suck or whatever, and it's like, okay. So I think there's gonna be a vocal minority, but it'll be interesting to see how it's received.
Yeah, there's lots of optimism on your YouTube channel.
I mean, I think there's a segment of folks who probably want it to be a war game, and it's not going to be. But I'm very excited about this year. I think Distant Worlds 2 I need to put time into it because it looks awesome. Victoria 3, I think, is going to be, you know, a really interesting game to dive into. I think there's a lot of stuff that Microprose is working on. I think it's just a question of when it comes out that I can't wait to jump into. Power, as you mentioned, Wolf, is a game that I really want to play. Tiny Combat Arena looks cool, so we'll see how I feel about it once I start playing it. And it's after really kind of a meh kind of a year. Hopefully we feel better about 2022 when we're revisiting this in 2023.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks for coming on again, Wolf. It's a pleasure as always. If you come on again, I'll have to think of a better intro for you. You know, we got to figure out how to keep these things fresh.
I think I am the perfect, guy to add on to make this just a trio.
I mean, if you want to talk a lot more about strategy games.
Well, we don't want to interrupt your other podcast.
Yeah, I offer a fresh simulation spin. I don't know. I don't know.
Single malt simulation.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm a funny guy. Occasionally, I have some good jokes.
I think that's giving yourself a lot of credit, but that's okay.
Well, listen, if he's not going to give himself credit, who is? Anyway, where can folks find you who aren't already aware, Wolfpack?
I have a YouTube channel called Wolfpack345. I play a lot of simulation games like flight sims, sub sims. Silent Hunter is a staple of my channel, and Cold Waters. And when Sea Power and all these games we discussed come out, they will be staples of my channel as well. So I guess I also live stream on Twitch under the username Wolfpack345 Live. So that tickles your fancy, you can find me there.
Okay, and Tortuga, as everybody already should know, they can find you at Tortuga Power on YouTube, or Tortuga Powered, right? And you can find me at The Historical Gamer on YouTube. So thanks everybody for coming or listening to another episode of the Single Malt Strategy Podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And until next time, this is Matt, the Historical Gamer, saying for Eric, Tortuga Power, and Wolfpack345, thanks for coming out and have a good one.